said, 2010 students, I hope you guys had a great week last week. So just to recap, for week 12, we were learning about disproportionality, and we were learning about culture. And one of the major assignments that you had to do was for you to turn in your service learning written analysis paper. Okay, so that was due on the 16th, which should have been yesterday, because this opened up on Monday today. So just make sure that if it's late, you email me and let me know you didn't do it and tell me why, and get it submitted to Dropbox. But it's important for me to grade your service learning when I have all the parts. I am in the process of grading them, so once they are finished, I will email you and I'll let you know that I have graded them, and you'll have your feedback as well. So that was last week. This week we are in week 13. So I don't know when you're watching this, but the content opens Monday, April 17th, and it will go through until Sunday, April 23rd. I can't believe we are almost done with this semester. So spring classes end April 28th. So we are getting down to the wire. So if you are a person who is missing any RADs, last week unfortunately was the last opportunity for a RAD. I know several people have already completed all 4 of the required RADs, but if you're still missing one, you need to get in contact with me, or if you're not sure if you completed all of them, email me and I will be glad to let you know. So you will have to probably, if you're missing some, go back and complete some earlier RADs, because it's important for you to turn those in. Every assignment counts because it gives you points, and I also grade you on your attendance and participation. Attendance meaning I can go in and check every time that you log on into my class, how much time you spent in each section. So this is what I'm looking at when I'm grading you on attendance and participation. So just make sure that you are keeping in contact and reading the emails that I send out. So with all that being said, we're going to move into week 13 this week, and we're going to go over what you're going to be doing. So this week, in week 13, we're really going to be looking at what differentiated instruction is. So we're going to define differentiated instruction is, and how can you use it in the classroom to meet the needs of all students. So we want to maximize learning of all students, but we also want to remember that we want to meet the needs of all students. And differentiated instruction is really going to allow us to do that. So regardless if you have students who have IEPs, exceptionalities, or just have a learning disability, or maybe they just struggle in certain subject matter, differentiating all your instruction is going to allow you to support them and meet their needs. So our learning objective this week is to discuss the relative advantages of instructional tools and strategies based on student characteristics, insight, differentiated instruction. And that's going to allow us to meet 2 of our course outcomes. So it's going to allow us to identify recommended strategies appropriate to children with exceptionalities in the inclusive classroom. Inclusive meaning the general ed that has all different types of learners, even those with IEPs or 504s. And then it also allows us to meet the course outcome of describe the different disability categories of disabilities by not only IDEA but Tennessee State Department of Education, right? So we're looking at all those disabilities, and we are considering those types of needs when we are looking at differentiated instruction. So for your learning task this week, you're going to be reading in your textbook. You'll see here in a minute. I also have an article for you to read, and you're going to be completing an IRIS module and doing a worksheet that goes along with the IRIS module. Okay, so those are your main learning reading tasks this week. So your assignment, as I mentioned, is going to be the IRIS module, which is called differentiated instruction. It goes along perfectly with our content. So you're going to complete the IRIS module. You can take the assessment, and we'll talk about it in just a few minutes when we get there. You can take the assessment, which I always encourage you to, because it gives you that initial feedback. But aside from that assessment, the worksheet is really going to help you as a study tool. So make sure that you complete the worksheet because that's what you're going to be submitting to Dropbox for an assignment. So your assessment of what I'm going to grade you is what we just have talked about for your assignment. You are going to turn in and submit the differentiated instruction worksheet, and that's your assessment piece. Now, I did have some keywords and concepts. Some of these come out of the reading from the textbook, some of them come out of the article, some of them come out of the IRIS module. So all of these keywords and concepts is what you're going to be reading about. There's also a couple of videos that you're going to be watching that's inside the PowerPoint presentation. So all of these are going to really help gain a deeper understanding of what differentiated instruction is and what it even looks like in the classroom. Okay, so when we're talking about differentiated instruction, we're going to be talking about how you assess them. So we look at formative assessment and summative, flexible grouping, readiness, interests, learning profile, content. That means what they're learning, the process, product, learning environment, manipulatives, graphic organizers, learning centers, rubrics, self-assessments, portfolios. All of these are part of differentiated instruction and part of the classroom. Now, moving on, I told you you're going to be reading out of your textbook. In your Exceptional Learners textbook, you're going to be reading Chapter 2. This is a great, this is one of the chapters I feel like you can get a lot out of, because this is called Current Practices for Meeting the Needs of Exceptional Learners. So when we're looking through this textbook chapter, I do want to point out that there are some things that I want you to make sure that you're reading in the chapter. So it's going to talk about what your role is as a gen ed teacher. So if you're not going to go into special education, but you're going to be in the regular classroom, you will have to collaborate and work with special education teacher, right? So how are you going to meet the needs of those learners who maybe have IEPs, right? Those individualized education programs. So the textbook talked about what your responsibilities and expectations are as a general education teacher. And then what is the expectations for that special education teacher? So how are they going to help you, right, with those behavior problems or knowing about technological advances? So maybe assistive technology, they may know more about that for you to help little Johnny or Susie. And they know a lot about the special education law. So I know that we spent a lot of time in the first module talking about the special education law, but they know a lot about it. We're also going to be looking at what universal design is, or UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and how does that play a part in differentiated instruction to meet the needs. We're also going to be looking at, what are the current strategies when we're talking about technology. Technology is such a big deal in education, and we utilize it so much. So it's important for us to know the current trends and strategies that you use when you're looking at technology and you're going to incorporate it and implement it into your classroom. So those are just some of the important highlights that I wanted to pull out of the Chapter 2 text. The next thing is an article called What is Differentiated Instruction and Why Differentiate? It's not a long article. I think it's just 6 pages. This is a great article because it really not only defines what differentiated instruction is, but it lets you see why it's important for you to differentiate. So when we're talking about differentiation, we're really talking about meeting the needs of all learners, right? So all learners have different ways that they learn, right? They have different interests, different learning profiles. All their brains are wired differently, and they have different needs. So because of that, you have to look at how am I going to teach them, right? A lot of teachers want to teach to the middle of the class or the average class. This is not a proper approach, right? Because one size does not fit all. You really have to look at those learners who struggle or who have specific needs because they have an IEP. And you also have to look at those students who are very bright, right? And they need to be challenged. So this is frustrating for teachers who don't want to challenge those students, right? And they become very bored, right? So you're not using their strengths and their potential. those students are not going to be engaged and they're not going to be learning. So you have to be able to reach those students. We also have to look at how do we support those students who have IEPs or are struggling, right? So we have to think about how do we engage them and challenge them and meet all their needs. So the person who really is the guru, or I guess who created the differentiated instruction, is Carol Ann Tomlinson, and she's really a differentiation expert. Okay, so a lot of this material comes from her, but she talks about how you as a teacher really have to anticipate the differences in students, right? So you have to look at, are they ready to learn? We're looking at their interests, we're looking at their learning profiles. And because we're doing this, we realize they have different strengths. We realize that we have to create different learning paths. So what little Susie over here is doing may not be the same as little Amy. And that's okay, because they're still getting the same content, but they're doing it in a different way. So we have to make sure that we are differentiating and making things different, and we are giving them what they need, right? So we go back to that equal versus equitable, right? Or equality versus equal. Being everyone getting the same thing is not helping everyone, right? So it's not always the best. Not everyone needs the same thing. Some people need different things, and you're doing them a disservice if you are not differentiating. So we have to meet their needs, okay? So in the article, it talks about key characteristics of differentiated instruction, and I like how she broke it up into like a graph here, which really helps you. So it talks about examples and explains it. So each characteristic is really the embodiment of what this is and what it means. So differential instruction means that you as a teacher, you have to be proactive, right? So you have to be always thinking about watching, observing, seeing what kind of questions I have, what's not clear to them, and you have to constantly make adjustments, but you have to be proactive and always being one step ahead and being able to adjust. The other thing when we talk about differentiated instruction is really talking about it really needs to be more quality than quantity, right? So we are going to match that assignment to that student needs. We're not looking at giving them all the same type of work. Like little Johnny may just need 3 problems instead of 10 like everyone else, and that's okay. Because we're not looking at how much you're giving him, but the quality of what you're giving him. How is this supporting him? So think about a struggling reader. They need a lot of extra support in reading and writing. So we need to be able to give them what's appropriate for them. Think about the person who's advanced in math, right? Giving them more work when they're finished is not helping them, and also giving them things are too easy or where everyone else is not helping them. When you're differentiating your instruction, you really need to think about an assessment piece. Assessment is very important, and that was one of our key concepts this week. Is assessment is important because we have to look at, are we looking at meeting the needs? Does everyone have an opportunity to grow? Am I making sure we're having conversations? Are we having discussions in class? Am I looking at their work? I have to observe what they're doing. And then we have those formal assessments that they have to do. So this would be like unit exams, district exams, readiness test, statewide test. So those would be more of your formal assessments. And remember, when you're assessing, that's where you're able to get the information and data you need so you can modify and design and, kind of shift and make adjustments. And then when you're talking about differentiated instruction, your learning environment is so important, right? So we have to look at the environment as being a third teacher. How are you setting it up, right? We're also looking at what we're giving to students, which is the content. We're looking at the process, like, is this making sense to the students? How are they using this information, right? What kind of ideas are they coming up with? And we have to look at the product, like what they learned. So we look at the content, the process, and the product. And remember, these were all key terms that we looked at in the beginning of the module. So we also need to look at how our classroom is set up and what kind of tone this sets. We look at their readiness. Are they ready for this yet? We look at what they're interested in and connect that to what we're learning about. And we look at that learning profile, how they learn best, and if they have any specific needs. Then we look at how it's student-centered, right? So we have to respect students. That we know that we're giving them work that is challenging, meaningful, interesting, and engaging. Always, if you don't remember anything from this unit or this week, remember this. Give students work that's challenging for them, meaningful, interesting, and engaging. Now, when I say challenging, I don't want you to give them 2 grade levels above what they can do. Challenging means that when you go back to a student who has IEP, so we're going back to week 6 when we learned all about IEPs. So we're making a connection here. Challenging them means that it's helping them reach their goals, right? So you can't give them easy stuff. We need to make sure that we are supporting them. We're still scaffolding and supporting them while we're giving them the challenging stuff. So it has to be appropriate for the students. So then we're talking about how are you coordinating your activities in the classroom? You have to look at how much time this stuff takes, the space you have in your classroom, and the activities that you're giving them. So look at that before you look at the actual information or content itself. The next one is that you need to look at differentiating everything you do. So you do whole group, you're going to do individual instruction as well. So think about flexible grouping, right? And how that can help you when you're differentiating instruction. And the last one is it really needs to be organic, right? When you collaborate with students and you see them as being your partner in their own learning and respect them, that's when we can start setting goals and they can take ownership of their learning, right? And they're involved with it. And you make adjustments and monitor as this is happening. That's what we mean by organic. Okay, so there's also misunderstandings and misconceptions about how you differentiate, so that's really neat for you to look at too. So it's a wonderful article, so please read through it. Okay, I have some resources here. It's just the worksheet that we talked about. I also went ahead and put in your homework there as well. Okay, so for your presentation, I have a PowerPoint presentation. It's going to go along pretty well with what we've already been talking about with the article, what you're reading. So make sure you go through the PowerPoint. One thing I did want to point out is on slide 7, I have 2 videos here that really talk about differentiated instruction and give you examples of what it looks like in the classroom. So I have them pulled up here. So the first video is differentiated instruction, where they really define what it is. They talk about how this works and why it's important in the classroom, and then they give you some examples. I go a step further and I have a video here for you at a charter school where you get to see teachers actually using differentiated instruction and kind of get an insight to what it actually looks like. So make sure, and that you can find that once again in your PowerPoint on slide 7. To get it to work, if you're just in this, so this is just the regular view. You can actually hit presentation mode. So if you look down here where my cursor is, do you see where it has this box with this line? It looks like a TV. So this is called slideshow. When you push it, it turns it to presentation mode. Okay, and that's how you'll be able to get to the videos. I don't think you can click on them unless you're in the slideshow. So then the last slide is just telling you what you're going to be doing for your assignment and how I'm going to be assessing you this week. Okay, and there's my citations as well. Okay, so going down into the assignments, I want to talk about the IRIS module, okay? And what you're going to do is when you click on the IRIS, when you click in the assignment, it's going to bring you here. So you'll see that you have a link to the IRIS module. So just like all the other ones we've done. And this is really going to play really well with differentiating instruction because this one's called Universal Design for Learning. And you're going to hear a lot of people use the acronym UDL. And UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning, and how these principles can help with differentiating instruction. So you can go through the module, and then of course there's assessment, which I always encourage you to do whether you have to turn it in or not, because this is allowing you that feedback. So you're gaining understanding and seeing kind of what you maybe need a little bit more engagement or to dive deeper into the content. The next thing is your worksheet. So the worksheet is what you're going to be turning in. So as you can see here, I put page numbers. Okay, so the page numbers means that in the module, the IRIS module on page 4 is where you're going to be able to fill this in. So the first section, it wants you to look at how do you as a teacher respond to the different learners' need. So there's 3 principles that we look at. So usually it's tasks and assessment and flexible grouping. But how do we actually differentiate these things? So you're going to list how you differentiate, so what those 3 are, and you're going to find it in the IRIS module. So once you hit begin, okay, that's the first one, and you're going to watch a movie kind of introducing it. And then this is your initial thoughts. And then we actually start the IRIS module. So it's set for us to go to page 4. Okay. So page 4 is where we were talking about those 3 that you've got to pick out, right? Okay, so we're going to look at page 4 when we're answering it. This says page 5. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to look at that as well. So you're just going to use the IRIS module to answer these questions, right? That's what you're going to be turning in. And you'll see here, you've got 4 pages that you're going to be doing. All right, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out and I'll be more than glad to help you. But that's how I'm going to assess you. So let me go back here. The last thing that I want to mention is that I did put a Nearpod quiz here for you. Again, this is another way outside of the IRIS module to look and assess how well you're doing. So this is just going to give you that feedback that you need. That's pretty much all of week 13. As I mentioned, if you did not turn in the service learning written analysis paper, you need to make sure to do that and please contact me. And I'll most likely, since I'm in the middle of grading it, I'll probably send you an email, say, hey, you didn't turn this in. And once I get it all completed, I will be sure to email you and tell you when your grade is ready. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If not, I will see you next time. Take care.